Listen up. It's time for a politically entertaining exclusive interview.
Joining us today on Politically Entertaining, she is a writer and contributor for NBC Black. She's also the managing editor of Politic 365. You can catch her almost on a weekly, almost daily basis on TV One, Roland Martin's News One Now. And you can also catch her on MSNBC from time to time. Lauren Burke, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, I wanted to jump right into it. You know, Trump has been the talk of this election, and he has recently said that the, quote, shackles have come off. And I just wanted to ask, in your opinion, do you think that, does he really believe that that's a winning strategy? Or I'm kind of thinking that he's probably preparing for something after the election. Like he wants to throw his base as much red meat as possible, shore them up. And then after the election, I don't know specifically what he would do other than be a nuisance to Clinton the entire 4 years. But do you think he thinks this is a winning strategy, or is there something else at play here?
I actually, believe it or not, do think that he thinks it is a winning strategy. I know that's hard to believe given what we've been watching in this extraordinary political season. But I think, Donald Trump has shown himself to be, a narcissist and sort of delusional about reality. And so it's really in keeping with what we've seen over the last year. I mean, when he announced in July 2015, we saw some delusion right off the bat. This is a guy who hasn't really had to live the type of life that most Americans have to live in this country. He was born on third base. And when your father hands you $14 million at a young age and you live in sort of a cloistered environment that he grew up in, it's not surprising that he has sort of a disconnection with basic reality. And, of course, the political reality right now is that, in all probability, we're looking at a landslide situation for Hillary Clinton, certainly with the Electoral College, maybe even with the popular vote. We know it's one thing to get into the conversation about the various demographics in the country, African Americans, Hispanics, etc. But when you tick off women across the board, and we're talking not just one segment of the female population, but everyone, young, old, etc., that is a
Correct.
Really dangerous game in politics. And that's a dangerous game that he's playing. So I don't know that he's playing for after the election. I think that he's actually thinking, as hard as it is to believe, I think he's actually thinking that he can win.
That's amazing. Something I noticed during the second debate with Hillary, it seemed like there are two things that he brought up that she refuses to respond to, or just haven't taken the opportunity to respond to. One is he went after her hard about her husband's, transgressions in the past, his infidelity and how he treated women. But she could hit him right back with the things like when Bill Clinton was going through those things, Trump came out and defended him and said some of the same things about those women that he's accusing Hillary of saying. But she didn't bring that part up. And he keeps bringing up the whole super predator comment by her. I don't know why she won't act with what he said about the Central Park Five and how he's doubled down on them as recent as last week, saying that he still thinks he's right, even though those men have been exonerated and owed money by the city. Do you have any insight to why it seems like she won't go, address those two issues, or is she not prepared to bring those up?
Well, number one, the Democrats, in general terms here, are not good at marketing and PR. I mean, just as a party, as a general observation,
Agree.
Republicans are just better at that, right? So you have that. Then you have the fact that, you can just watch this by looking. I don't have any inside information, although we, from time to time, do sit down with some of the principals who run her communication shop. But you can, by watching, you don't need to be any political expert to see that she's been overcoached to effectively sit back and let him make a fool of himself. You can see that their entire campaign strategy is basically, let him make a fool of himself and people will vote for me because they think he's a fool. There was an ad that came out from Hillary's super PAC called Enough. The entire ad is just clips of Donald Trump running his mouth and a black guy narrating it. It was geared to get black voters, effectively an ad geared to tick off black voters about the birtherism situation and some of the things Donald Trump has said. It's not an ad stating, okay, this is what Hillary Clinton is going to do for, the black community. It's an ad that is trying to get black voters to vote for her because they're against him. And that debate strategy is in keeping with that. So it's basically, her standing there, he says stuff, and then she's high and he's low, and that's where this is. Now, I personally don't think it's a particularly good strategy because, she left a lot on the table in terms of some of that he said, and she just sort of left it out there. And it wasn't just the super predator thing and the Central Park Five. Obviously, on the infidelity issue, that's a little bit more complicated. She's never been known as a person to talk publicly about her private situation with her husband. And when we go back to Arkansas, we saw that Frontline just did a really good documentary on both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and they went into that, the fact that she does not publicly address these things. I think it's easier said than done in terms of, I can sit here and say, well, if I was standing there, I would have said this and that. But when your husband is sitting in the front row next to your daughter on national TV and 60 million people are watching, you're probably not going to be into the idea of talking about some of the most private, parts of your relationship with your husband of over 30 years. So it's easy to say it, when you are not that person, but as big as these people might be and as distant as they might be. These people are human beings. I covered Hillary Clinton in 2000 when she ran for the Senate. I'm from New York. I remember Hillary Clinton when she was on, in the Senate. I actually had sort of a little bit of a connection with her to some extent because, like most of the senators, you start to get to know them after a while when they're around, even if they're only around for maybe one term. And she always struck me as somebody who is not the person who's going to, tell you everything. And I don't know that she should be required to do that as a public official. That's a really difficult thing to sort of bring up. On super predators, she's a pat answer for that. She should have hit him. I think she should have been on the, obviously she should have been on the offensive more, not only with that, but so many other things. But that's a touchy subject as well, because she did say it. The only reason she actually apologized for it this year is because a Black Lives Matter activist outed her at a fundraiser in South Carolina, barrister. And even that was kind of under the table. They talked to Jonathan Capehart, and John Capehart put the apology out. I mean, that wasn't even done on camera. So it's touchy because it goes back to her husband's policy, and she has been very careful to tiptoe around ticking him off on the issues like the Clinton crime bill, et cetera, and so on. So that's where that's at.
I'm going to jump in here, Lauren. So one of the things we talk about on our show a lot is local politics and vocally. Now, with even though it looks like now Trump is struggling and he probably is going to lose potentially in a landslide, in your estimation, the alt-right movement that now seems to be alive and well with the white nationalist, rhetoric behind it, do you feel like now you're going to see a lot more candidates running kind of under that ideology, maybe not with the same bold rhetoric as Trump, but certainly with the same nefarious mindset?
Well, actually, we've already seen that. I mean, the Trump thing is a manifestation of the Tea Party, and that all started in 2010 when we had this situation where effectively the right wing of the Republican Party showed up in an attempt to obstruct the first black president of the United States. That effort started literally on the night of the president's first inauguration, which was January 20, 2009. And that effort was a plan, a very deliberate plan to block everything that this president planned to do. Things that, they sometimes agree on. Now, some of that kind of fell off a little bit when they did the trade bill, et cetera. There's been some things that they have actually passed, very few things. But that plan was put into place effectively, planned by Newt Gingrich, Paul Ryan, et cetera, and so on. So that Tea Party effort that we saw is really a road to nowhere. I mean, you see the people who come into Congress. I don't need to tell you. When you have people walking through the door like Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz, who are there for absolutely no other reason than to run their mouth, make $174,000 and fly back and forth to their district on the taxpayer dime with absolutely nothing to show for it. That was the plan. It's a road to nowhere. So the so-called alt-right, the so-called Tea Party, when we examine American history, it doesn't take a whole lot to observe the fact that when African Americans get something, historically, there is always pushback. We saw it after the Emancipation Proclamation. We saw it after the Civil Rights Bill was passed and the Voting Rights Act. We've seen it every single time. There's always a big pushback after African Americans get something. In the perception of a certain segment of the Republican Party and a certain segment of this country, us getting something was, of course, the election of Barack Obama, and now the pendulum is swinging back the other way. These things like Breitbart, the Tea Party, Daily Caller, all of those things happened after the election of Barack Obama. There's voter ID laws. All of that happened after the election of Barack Obama. And, of course, given the demographics in the country, the changing demographics, which are obvious, we African Americans are actually not the biggest minority group, obviously. Latinos are. People see that. They know what power is. They know how power is shaped and formed. And so this, quote, so-called alt-right, which is just another way of saying, white supremacy, is really sort of, I think, scared of the idea that they may take over. Of course, individuals and movements are a lot more complicated than that. People tend to forget the fact, of course, that Barack Obama is actually black and white, and he's turned out to be much less progressive than people thought he would be. So Donald Trump is the monster that they created. As you can see, Donald Trump has no ideology, really, no set ideology, he has no policy. He is a manifestation of the Tea Party. A lot of these Tea Party members you see in the House and Senate, it's not that they don't have an ideology, but they have no plan to do anything other than obstruct the president. That's it. Many of them have left. Many of them walked out the door. A few are starting to lose. And I do think certainly that there's something to be said for the frustration that people have. You can't have 40-something million people in poverty in the United States and not have frustration. At the same time, we had that when Bush was here, and you didn't see all this excitement. Donald Trump is really, I think, the last desperate act of the Southern strategy. And until the Republican Party lets go of this notion that they can separate people and, make poor whites believe that they have nothing in common with poor blacks and all that, and that is effectively Southern strategy politics, they're going to lose on the national level again and again and again. What changes a political party is losing. That's the only thing. We could talk about stuff. There can be books that come out. What will actually change them is losing over and over again. Everybody thought it would happen after Mitt Romney. It didn't. This is probably going to be it.
So that's a great point you made about them losing over and over again. And we've had like Senator Tim Scott on our show, who obviously he's a black Republican senator, which is, kind of a big deal because generally, as you mentioned, a lot of black people, Southern strategy, have been pushed away from, say, the Republican Party since, obviously civil rights. So going forward, do you think that there is going to be another party that could be formed that black people could maybe gravitate towards? Because right now, I think a lot of black people with any kind of social conscience, they are feeling like, okay, well, either they're not voting or they're voting potentially Democrat. Maybe some are voting for Gary Johnson or Jill Stein. I've seen that. But I have seen many African Americans are not voting for Trump for obvious reasons. And so just going forward after 2020 with the Republican Party, as you said, if they continue on the Southern strategy, they almost force, I think African Americans, we'd like more of a voice, more of a choice, but is there no way forward really at the, say, presidential level based on the way the parties are set up, or do you see something else emerging that will give more options in the future?
Well, the problem with black politics and black power in the United States right now is that black advocacy almost never has a specific ask like other groups do. And if you look at advocacy, if you look at like the most effective, whether we agree with them or not, the most effective lobbying groups like the NRA or APAC, they have like one thing that they hammer over and over again. A lot of people to me, what's the money? NRA has money. No, NRA has focus, and they push it, and they connect that policy focus to votes. So the answer to me is not a third political party. The answer is to figure out what works in political advocacy. What doesn't work is kissing up to the President of the United States because he happens to be the same skin color as you and not pushing him. Because it really doesn't matter whether it's George Bush, Bill Clinton, or Barack Obama. You got to push whoever's in power. And you've got to know what you want. You've got to ask for it. That's true. That's true in life. And if you don't do that, is not going to happen. And what we see with particularly our so-called professional civil rights organizations, the NAACP, the Urban League, they're corporate funded, corporate driven, and they're scared to stand up to anybody. What we saw with Black Lives Matter was they didn't care. They got out in the streets. They made a demand. They didn't care who they pissed, and that was it. And you saw that worked. For the first time in American history, we got into a very deep discussion with these candidates about police brutality. That problem has been around forever for African Americans. I mean, we can obviously go to YouTube right now, put in Malcolm X's name, police brutality, and Malcolm X is standing there talking about police brutality 50 years ago. So, I mean, they got that on the agenda through pushing. So it's not the third political party, pushing your issues, figuring out what you want and pushing it. And until we get there, what black people are told in politics is to vote. That's what we're told, vote. What Emily's List and these groups, Human Rights Campaign, what they tell their people is they don't just say vote. They say don't vote for this person unless they do this. So La Raza, and I could just name any group on the right or left, at no point do they just tell their folks that they're having an advocacy day with, oh, just go vote. I mean, they say, look, if this person is not for us on this issue, we're voting against. Now, is it more complicated for African Americans? Of course it is. We have a broader sweep of issues because our history is completely different than everybody else's, no matter what anybody says. And I know other ethnic groups, they'll say, well, we had a tough time when we came here. Okay, you did not have a tough time for 400 years. You were not forced here in chains. It's just totally different. And, of course, the other big difference, under the law, African Americans were treated that way. It wasn't somebody's opinion. I mean, when you have stuff written into the law, that's a lot different than somebody being ticked off for, a 20-year period. So, the idea that we need some sort of political force or some different party or some different person to come along, we have the vote strength to get what we want. We just need it to be organized, and we need to decide what we want and demand it, and then we have to put a threat onto that demand, just like these other groups do. NRA, you don't vote our way, you don't do our thing. We blast an email to millions of people telling you that, telling them that you didn't vote our way. So there's a threat. If you don't do this, this will happen. We don't have that. There's no political group, advocacy group for African Americans that has that. The closest we get is Color of Change. Color of Change, blast stuff out. They say, hey, we're calling you out on this. They will embarrass people. They're it. NAACP doesn't do that. And I realize, I think the other thing that's crippling us too is the 5013C model, which thankfully Black Lives Matter is rejecting. Because, the 5013C effectively means you can't get involved in politics. Obviously, the civil rights movement came through the church. They're not supposed to get involved in politics. So, in a direct way, meaning, endorsing candidates. So, to me, it isn't the third-party model. It's the fact that, we do need a new generation of politicians to come along, and I'm not ageist. We do have older politicians who are just fine. In fact, we have older politicians who are better than the younger ones. But the Democratic Party, in my view, kind of made a little bit of a mistake here with their nomination. I mean, Hillary Clinton is not a particularly good candidate, and they need their next generation to step up. And the people who are between the ages of, 40 and 50 and late 50s, so that was another sort of mistake. But as far as advocacy and the way POPs works, unfortunately right now for black advocacy, we are not playing the game as well as everybody else.
That answer on how other groups tell their people to do more than vote, that was excellent. We're talking to Lauren Burke, managing editor for Politic365.com, and like I said earlier, you can catch her frequently on TV One, News One now with Roland Martin. I want to get you out of here with this final question, Lauren. I was reading one of your articles, I believe it was your latest article on Politic365, where you were talking about Katrina Pearson, she's something else. She was blaming hip hop for the lewd comments that Trump said back in 2005. She's also the same person that said something to the effect of "so what" that they're Muslim when they were talking about the Muslim ban. And even in 2012, I think she referred to Obama and Mitt Romney as like half breeds or something like that. Yet and still, there's this false equivalency with her and Hillary Clinton. Not with her, I'm sorry, with Trump and with Hillary Clinton as far as how they're both equal. I've seen things where they're both equally racist. They're both equally bad for the country. You look at people like Katrina Pearson and some of the other people that Trump has surrounded himself with, combined with the things that Trump has said. How can that notion exist? Why is there so much weight given to the fact that Trump and Hillary are pretty much equally bad? We agree that Hillary is not a great candidate, but how is she painted in the same light as Trump with so many people, in your opinion?
Well, they don't really have any other argument. When your candidate shows up on a tape saying what Donald Trump said in 2005 Access Hollywood tape, and this is leaving out all the other things that we know and that we've heard and have been documented, what can you say? Now, you would think that Katrina Pearson would have been bright enough to just say, look, my candidate apologized the other day at the debate. Let's move on, and just kind of repeat that. Instead, she wants to play this dance of blaming, quote, something. They have, their candidate is somebody who is completely devoid of any qualification for the office. I mean, he is something that we've never seen before for a major party. For a major party to nominate somebody like this, it's very hard to message that person. Kellyanne Conway was on today, and there was an interview on a few hours ago. You can see it in her face. You can see it in her inflection that she doesn't believe what's coming out of her mouth. She's halting. She's not delivering, her lines because she knows she doesn't believe in what she's saying. Right. And I need to tell you, it's pretty obvious. A lot of these consultants that lock onto these campaigns are making money, and that's it. I mean, if you're going to sit there for, most people, okay, I'll sit here and I'll grin and bear it for 27 days because I'm making $25,000 a month. Okay, so that's what this is. Omarosa Manigault is a Democrat. I mean, about a year and a half ago, I went to a Ready for Hillary reception. She was sitting in the middle of the room. Wow. How she suddenly now is working for a Republican campaign? Everybody knows she's a Democrat. It's not like this is huge, breaking news. And she's on the campaign doing what exactly? I mean, so it is to get paid for a lot of these people. If you're a black Republican, I mean, that's like being a left-handed pitcher that can throw a 99-mile-an-hour fastball. You will get hired by somebody. You see it in football, right? You see people who have no business playing quarterback, but there's not a lot of good quarterbacks in the NFL. So you get, you get somebody out there that really shouldn't be out there, but there they are making, $17 million. And that's what it is in politics when it comes particularly to black Republicans. And so that's some of what you're seeing. There's just kind of they have nothing to say. They're busted. And then also, too, there's no organization within the campaign, so they're not really sitting down in meetings and saying, okay, this is what we're going to say, surrogates, as a group. You remember a few months ago, wasn't even months ago, it was like a month ago, we saw various black pastors running around. Mark Burns, the dude from Ohio, whose name I can't even remember, they're out running around saying whatever they want. I mean, you could tell there was no direction. You could tell they got no talking points. The way these campaigns work is, everybody gets sent emailed talking points. This is what we're all supposed to say. I mean, I don't know what the Trump team is doing, but then again, when your candidate is completely undisciplined and from day to day you have no idea what he's going to say, it's very hard to adjust and figure out what you're going to say. You see, Kellyanne Conway was in the witness protection program for 4 days. 3 days after that tape came out because she didn't know what to say. And she's the main person who's supposed to be on TV. So, they're busted. And Katrina Pearson, I'll admit, when she first started, right up until the time she started saying dumb stuff about 3 or 4 months ago, I thought she was actually doing a fairly good job with a really difficult candidate. Now she's coming off the rails. Because now, I thought she was doing a pretty good job. Now, these interviewers have lost their patience. We're at the end of the day. The anchors are starting to get annoyed. Jake Tapper and them, it's like a jailbreak now. They're like, I'm not taking this. Few weeks ago, Chris Matthews busted Rudy Giuliani on national TV on the birthday thing. I mean, just busted him. Rode his ass for 5 minutes straight talking about, no, you're going to tell me whether or not you think the president was born in the United States. Now, that didn't happen before. They kind of let these people come on the air, say whatever, and then walk away. That game is over because now everybody sees that what they were doing, which I don't know why it took so long for us to figure this out in the media, but somehow it did. What they were doing is they're coming on the air saying a bunch of lies and walking off. And that's a victory for you if you know, 1 million people are watching and there's no correction. And that's what Trump did during the debate, by the way. You got 60 million people watching. You'll say anything. Oh, she should be in jail for her email. There's no detail. You know, you just say it. And 30 million people believe it. You kind of won that, you know.
That's right.
And so you got to be careful in the media, and Hillary Clinton has to be careful to jump up and correct it hard and not just say, oh, yeah, there's fact checkers. No, you got to correct that hard because the correction comes out later and only maybe 10 million people see the correction. So I think that, you know, the Trumps are just, well, what do you do? But if you're getting paid what they're getting paid, you'll probably say to yourself, okay, I got 27 days of this. I can grin and bear. But there's a lot of hucksters involved. There's a lot of people who are just on the payroll to be on the payroll. And when it comes the diversity piece in the Trump campaign, there's some real fakery going on. And they you know, Republicans right now, again, they're still in the Southern strategy mode. It's like they think they could just put a black face out there, and that's all they need to do. If you got black skin in the pulse beat, we'll put you up there on TV. You'll sit behind Donald Trump, and that's that. But obviously, there's more to it than that. People are more complicated than that. Our issues are you know, African American issues are more complicated than that. It doesn't work. And you'll see on November 8th, on Election Day, that it in fact did not work. You know, I mean, it's coming. It's coming.
We definitely shall see. Lauren Victoria Burke, again, the managing editor of Politic365.com. You can also visit blurb.com, where she has a book, Birth of a Statesman, 475 pictures of now President Obama, that pretty much they follow him from 2005 to 2009 up to he's sworn in as president, I believe. And you can check that out on that website and learn more about Lauren as well. Also, you can follow her on Twitter at LV Burke, which stands for Lauren Victoria Burke, on Twitter. We want to thank you for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot anytime, and I'll see you. I'll see you around the hill, as you know. Thanks a lot.
Will do. We hope to have you back again. Have a good one.